Hi, so first of all, let's have a live Ret Q&A at some point. So next Saturday, which will be the 4th of August, I'm going to do another live Ret Q&A where we can come on and just talk about how we've been going, because by this time we'll have had a few weeks of everyone experiencing the BFA Ret as it is with the pre-patch, and it'll be getting, well, very much closer to the launch of the expansion itself. It will be on YouTube this time rather than Twitch, so a notification will go up on there a few days before. It'll be at the same time as normal. It's going to be 7 PM UK time, so that'll be Saturday the 4th of August. So today, just a couple of quick things really. The first of which, I was talking about one of these on the Azeroth review on Tuesday because it applies to lots of specs. I have to correct myself a little bit though. So one thing I was talking about is, the thing that started it off for me was Kib, who does stuff with Havoc Demon Hunts in particular, mentioning the fact that when you sim, the difference between playing what should be the optimal spec well, with a patchwork sim of course, you know, but the difference between doing that and getting your DPS value and playing it, you know, in a very poor way, and they came up with a model for getting someone who doesn't really know how to play the spec well. In other words, you're almost pressing whichever buttons look best, largely haphazard. Difference wasn't that great. It was like 1%. 1% difference between playing optimally and not at all optimally. And this has been the case for a number of specs. There's been a few specs where these comparisons have been done, and it's looking like there really isn't a great deal of difference between playing really well. You don't really distinguish yourself by playing well and playing with the most difficult to use talents and all the rest of it. And you know, and the Ret Theory Crafters did one for Rets as well. Now, I did say that it was actually even closer for Rets than it is for some of those usual meme, oh, Rets easy spec, blah, 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 whack-a-mole, all that rubbish. But I have to correct myself, because it's not. It is actually still much closer than you would feel comfortable with. But actually, the difference between the optimally played Ret and the, what was termed mouth breather, is 3%. So in actual fact, when you compare it, when I've actually compared the numbers properly with what's coming out for some of the other specs, it's actually looking like Ret Paladin is one of the more complicated specs to play in BFA. Oh my goodness, the meme has been turned on its head, would you believe it? But nonetheless, even 3%, is that really enough to distinguish? Not really. Think about it this way, you know, that given the amount of holy damage we do, generally speaking, the difference between playing optimally and mouth breather is less, only a bit less, but still less than the difference between having a Demon Hunter in your raid and not for the debuff, the brand. How appalling is that? That it's more important that you have a Demon Hunter in your raid for your DPS than it is that you know how to play the spec well. Because people are asking, oh, and you know, about the guide that's going to come out, and I'm going to talk about the guide as well. That'll be coming out for BFA, the big one. Obviously, I've put a pre-patch one out, but in terms of one that should do for BFA, I'll talk about that. But yeah, that's the thing. And then, so I was thinking to myself, well, I was really asking, and thinking, but at the moment, of course, tuning hasn't happened, and some of the more active talents at the moment you wouldn't use where we are now because they're not simming well enough. So a classic example is Execution Sentence at the moment isn't really where it needs to be, where we tended to be using Righteous Verdict for, you know, single target fights, and then Zeal for other fights. And they're both effectively passive. Righteous Verdict, all right, you've got to keep a bit of an eye on, but you can treat them as basically being passive talents. So will it make a difference with Execution Sentence? Because you could look at Execution Sentence and say, well, you know, of course this must make a difference because there's optimal times to use it. You want to get out as much holy damage as you can during that time, so wait till you've got, maybe you get a bit of holy power saved up. Obviously you've got to spend some of it to do the thing, and then blah, 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 blah. No. The best way to do this, because again, different conditions have been run, different APLs have been run for this as well. And the best thing you can do with Execution Sentence is use it on cooldown. You do not wait. You don't even think if there's an optimal time to use it. The optimal time to use it actually is as long as you can do some damage. Obviously, it's not going to be a great idea if you're stuck in the middle of nowhere because you've had to run out for something. But nonetheless, you want to use it on cooldown because it's super important that you get to use it during wings as well. So delaying it too much might mean if you're using wings on cooldown. I mean, you could argue if you're not going to, if you know your next wings isn't going to be on cooldown, you're going to delay that a bit. Well, you can afford to delay your execution sentence a little bit. But I mean, that's another thing where it's important to draw a distinction here, because we're talking about sim differences on patchwork fights. Patchwork, plant your feet, just DPS the boss. In reality, on raid boss fights and in dungeons as well, particularly mythic raids and in high mythic plus dungeons, there's more skill in terms of getting the best out of your character than just simply knowing the rotation well and knowing your priority system. Because there are little things like that. So, you know, with execution centers, like I say, if you think to yourself, well, I'm not going to use wings as soon as it comes off cooldown, I need to delay it for 10 seconds because I need it to line up with this thing, then that means you've got 10 seconds grace for the 3 execution sentences you'll use between them. So, you know, there is that to it as well. And that's maybe where you can distinguish yourself. So it's not going to be impossible to distinguish yourself between someone who doesn't play it as well. But it's just, you know, even if it is a straightforward fight or you're on an easy farm fight where you don't have to worry too much about mechanics or you're just doing normal or heroic or something, where again the same thing may apply, there isn't, you know, the difference is going to come down to, like I say, whether you've got a demon hunter and or a monk, whether you've got your other buffs active like your attack power buff from a warrior, your level of gear. I mean, that's another thing that is going to shift your capable output towards gear level. So if there's 2 of you with the same spec in the same raid and one's better geared but not such a good player, they could look a lot better out of it just because of their gear bonuses being worth more than the skill gap. So that's a bit concerning. That is a little bit of a worry. And the fact, and I was saying this on Tuesday, the fact that this is the case, from what I now gather to be most specs at least, you know, this is wider than I initially thought even on Tuesday, seems like it's deliberate. Again, it's one of those things that Blizzard haven't talked about. Now, speaking of things that Blizzard haven't talked about, so some of you will notice I did a video earlier in the week which got taken down because, well, they've now changed it, but they're pretending they never did change it. But that's fine, that's okay. So the issue was that people were finding plus 15 Titan Forge weapons in the alpha and beta. And I only found out this recently, but apparently it's been going on for a long time. People have been finding these things. So it's officially not going to be the case now, which is one of the reasons why I had to take that down. So Ian Hazakostas tweeted, so someone's saying, oh, found these things, and he's saying, oh, was it from Mythic Plus cache? Because those items show us Titan Forge because blah, blah, blah. Which, no, we know how that works. But he says, if it's from elsewhere in BFA, that'd be a bug. Well, it wasn't a bug because I know that they were doing that. But it doesn't matter about that. The fact is now they're going back to their original statement that weapons are not going to go above plus 10. Now, that's good because although I was explaining how if it did go up to plus 15, it's not that big a deal, it would have been perceived to have been a big deal because, you know, it just like with Legion, it took a very, very long time to get into people's heads that things are personal to you, which particularly which pieces of gear is going to be an upgrade is personal to you. You need to sim it. But that could also be the case for talents sometimes as well. And definitely be the case for talents in BFA. But, you know, it would have taken a similar amount of time to get, because, you know, the contribution from weapon damage has changed in BFA. It used to be huge, particularly for Rets or anyone that uses a big, slow two-handed weapon. And now it's not so big. It's not that it has no effect. It does. And in terms of effect, it has the biggest effect for Ret Paladins as well. So we, you know, stood to be the worst affected by this. And it probably would have meant, over the course of the expansion, lots of fiddly tuning to stop us getting out of whack with it as well. But nonetheless, even though it wouldn't have been that big a deal and it was manageable, it would still be better not going up to plus 15. So the fact that it's gone to plus 10 is good. It's generally better. I think even the theory crafters agree it would be better. But the perception will be better as well, because, you know, just the perception, and that's enough reason in itself for me, because perceptions are really important. So that's pretty good as well. That's useful. Now, final thing onto AoE. So our AoE, I don't think it's that bad at the moment, I have to say, but it could stand to be better, and it is planned to be better. Now, there are a couple of plans to improve our AoE, but until they're there, until it's released, then it's one of those things where they may not do it. My concern at the moment is one of the things that, well, actually both of them really, but one definitely so fundamentally changes the nature of the spec, because it fundamentally changes a really important baseline ability, that I have a fear that I'm going to do my guide as it has to be at the moment, my essentials guide, and then a day later they'll implement it and I will have to trash it. This isn't like there was a situation in Legion. So I produced my essentials guide, and at the time I produced, and I left that relatively late, as late as I did. But at the time I did that, Divine Steed wasn't a baseline ability. We were the only one, only melee certainly, not to have a baseline movement speed boost of any kind. It was a talent. Divine Steed was a talent. And then what they did is, very late on, they changed it to being baseline, and then in its place, for the talent place, of course, we got Cavalier to give it an extra charge. That was great, fantastic. But I'd already done the guide. Now, that wasn't such a fundamental difference. You know, although it was given us a baseline ability we didn't have before, and it made part of the guide not up to date, it didn't affect, for example, the section on our APL. It didn't affect, you know, things that I was talking about in terms of doing damage or anything like that. So I just left. That was okay. Whereas this one, if they made these changes, a lot of the guide would be wrong and I'd have to redo it, and there'd be nothing for it. I wouldn't just re-upload an updated version. I would have to actually delete the first one and re-upload the second one. So it'll be super important to, and I'll put a reminder in the beginning of the video even, to always check the playlist. I'll have, in fact, I've already got, although it's only got one video it's in at the moment, a BFA Ret Paladin guide playlist. I've removed all of the Legion stuff now, because all of that is worthless. The video still exists, but the playlists don't. So I've already removed all that, and that's what I'm going to have to be doing for that. But yeah, I do have this terrible fear, because they might not even, it might not even be something that goes live with the expansion. Because I'd be planning on bringing out the guide like a couple of days before the expansion. I'll leave it as late as I dare, basically. I mean, I'd be happy to bring it out earlier, but because I know that they might change something. But it might be something that they don't bring out until 8.0 something or other after launch. Maybe not even the dreaded 8.1 where, you know, there's already some specs, like particularly Shadow Priests at least. I know Enhancement Shamans are still also not too happy. But yeah, there's, you know, the Blizzard have already said, well, we're not even going to sort those out till 8.1 now. Maybe this is one of the things that also, even though it would be so simple to implement as well, it'd be a piece of cake. I've actually said, and the thing they've asked for without me saying anything, because I've already got into enough trouble this week saying things I shouldn't, is something, as soon as they announced the Legion form of Mastery, it's something I was asking for, and a number of other people. So I've been asking for a long time. And it's something that's been discussed and ummed and ahed about by the developers. That's what's making me, ordinarily I would think to myself, well, it's such an obviously great idea, just do it. And I'd be thinking to myself, yeah, they're about to do it. But because they've discussed it before and they're not doing it and ummed and ahed, they've been, I've been saying they've been sat on the fence on this issue for so long, they've got splinters in their arse. But they're still there. It's so easy to implement as well. Just chuck it in there. Just do it, but they won't. They'll wait till I've brought the guide out and then they'll do it. Pains in the arse. But anyway, that's it for this week. That's all I've really got to say in terms of any sort of Ret news. Next week, yeah, we'll do a live one, 7 PM UK time, Saturday the 4th of August. It'll be on YouTube. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube with the bell notification. You should then get the notification. But also remember, just follow me on Facebook or Twitter, because I'll also post something there as well. ahead of it because it's not something I do every week on this one. So I will put something on Twitter and Facebook as well to remind you. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, bell, and share with other people who might also be interested. And until next time, I'll see you later.